Welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, journalist Helen Fospero. Today I'm chatting to an old friend of mine from Channel 5 days. I was a presenter on the lunchtime and evening news show, and Lara Lewington was our weather forecaster. Lara was loved by viewers for her sunny disposition, and many laughs were shared in the makeup room. In 2011, Lara became a reporter on the BBC's well-respected technology programme Click, and for the last few years she's co-presented the show. Lara is married to money-saving expert Martin Lewis and is known affectionately by Martin as Mrs MSE. Lara, thanks so much for joining us. You're laughing away there. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. It's lovely to talk to you. I have such fond memories of our days at Channel 5 together. I feel like we were like two schoolgirls. We were sort of wandering around whispering about stuff.
Oh, we had such good fun, and it just shocked me to realise how many years ago it was that really lovely friendship was formed.
I know, it's incredible. And actually today it's 10 years that I've been working at Click. And so it really is a long time ago that it was Channel 5, but such happy memories. They were such great times.
We had such a good time, didn't we? And I think the viewer interaction was also really good fun. It was a great show to be part of, wasn't it? So friendly and felt very family-ish, if in a way.
It was great, and it was a great time in television. I think there were some really happy years, and all the other shows that we got to do off the back of it, the panel shows, the photo shoots, it was all proper glamorous telly.
That's funny that you say it's a decade ago since you started on Click, because I really recall that time and how interested you were in the programme, and I would never have said it was 10 years ago. That means time has really, really flown.
Yeah, I know, it's frightening, isn't it? Well, the age of our children gives it away.
Yes, exactly. I can't believe mine's 17. I think Francesca was a tiny little peanut when you and I first met.
I know.
But we'll talk about the weather days and Channel 5 and the old days. But first of all, I just wanted to ask, how have you been managing to still broadcast throughout the pandemic?
Well, I think I've actually been in quite a lucky position because as a technology show, pretty much everyone can shoot and edit. So we were starting from a good place. Unlike having to learn skills first off, most of us could go and do it. Only I was probably the one person in the office whose filming wasn't great. I could just functionally film an interview. So I had to really up my game, and I've now got quite into it. And actually, I keep on in this one room setting up loads and loads of different setups with different lighting. And I've gone from being really nervous about, am I recording? Is my microphone on? To actually really enjoying making different shots and trying to make it as beautiful as possible. So because we could all film ourselves and we all know how to edit and we all found tech solutions for everything, I think we've actually been okay, and we've managed every week to get a great show out on air with too much content to fill up the programme each week.
You've been the dream podcast guest so far because you've turned up with your beautiful professional microphone, you're recording yourself your end, but you did make me laugh right at the beginning when you went, oh no, I forgot to put my going live sign or live sign on. Do you actually have a live sign at home, Lara?
I do. I have an actual on-air sign, which whenever I'm filming the programme, or even if I'm filming just an interview with someone on Zoom or doing a bit of radio, I put it at the end of the corridor that leads to this room so that I don't hear footsteps, either big footsteps or small footsteps.
Well, you've been presenting Click from home for the BBC, but I gather it's become a bit of a two-channel family because hasn't Martin been doing his ITV material from another place in the house?
Yes, in the first lockdown, it was all quite an adventure, really, because we had his studio set up downstairs, so ITV downstairs, BBC upstairs, and I'd help him with the show. On Thursdays, I would become the proper at-home producer is what they called me. But I would really help with it. I'd be the floor manager. I'd sort of be his runner, but I'm not sure that I was that great a runner for him. I did all what I could to help, and it was lovely doing it from home. I think the first lockdown, we were all so scared about the virus. We didn't know how things were going to play out. We didn't know how long we were going to be home for. But actually, it was a really nice thing to focus on every Thursday evening because we had to finish our show by mid-Thursday. So actually, the timing of it was quite good. I just moved from one show to another.
And did you help him on the tech side at all, getting it all set up so he knew what he was doing, or is he quite good on that side?
I did it all. I am the tech consultant of the house. I'm not saying he couldn't do it, but he happily handed the job over to me. And even now, I had to set up some lighting for him recently downstairs. I have become tech support, so I'm very handy to have around. Maybe it's why he married me.
You've become... Maybe. I'm sure there's no other reason. Let's talk about Click first. You've become an expert in gadgets and new innovations over the last few years. What appealed to you about getting involved in Click in the first place?
I love the programme and I love the way that it showed how innovation can change our lives. And I think one of the big things that people don't really grasp immediately when talking about tech is it's not about some cold, hard device. It's not about, was this smartphone nice? It's actually what technology can do to change our lives and the effect that it can have. Both for us being able to track our health, but on a bigger scale, in the third world, being able to democratize healthcare. There's so much that technology can do. And I think the program does a really good job of actually looking at all of that, how artificial intelligence is going to make a difference in the future, how things are really going to evolve as time goes by, rather than just testing a couple of fun gadgets, which we do as well. And that's great. But that combination, I think, is really interesting.
What are the most interesting stories that you've come across over the last few years, Lara?
We've done quite a few sustainability stories. And I think they're always really interesting. There was one where I went to Norway and went out on a boat into the fjords and just surrounded by the most incredible scenery you could ever dream of. Everything looks so immaculate, so beautiful. But we were out with an underwater drone. And when you put the underwater drone under the water and you see what's going on, it's not such a beautiful sight. There was loads of plastic. There was a complete mess under there. In fact, someone I was traveling with on the boat who'd been out before doing exactly the same was saying how sometimes under the water you see cars where cars have been dumped on the ice, and as the ice breaks, they drop to underneath the water, which is really quite shocking. And we saw an old boat which was kind of all rotten and fallen apart. But it's incredible what you see under there. And I think it's that juxtaposition between that and what you see above the surface, which really brings it home. And it's the experiences like that that are the things that will really stick with me. And the ways that you see technology really making a difference, because seeing that changes your perception and it could make people just care that bit more.
And you've travelled a lot with the show, haven't you? What are the other sort of favourites or ones that really stick in your mind?
I had a wonderful trip to Taiwan where we looked at how the culture there had impacted technology. I went to a semiconductor factory where I had to dress in a hazmat suit and go through an air shower. An image which I don't think is so unusual given the COVID times we live in now. But at that point, it was, of course, an absolutely absurd way to be dressed. But that was really interesting, seeing what goes into the development of those little chips in our mobile phones, seeing the operation. And it wasn't to keep me safe that I was wearing this outfit. It was to keep the factory safe from me in case I had any dust on me. The precision and detail of what is inside those devices is amazing. One of the things which is quite amusing is how often you'll go and see something really, really incredible that totally blows your mind. But then when it's being demonstrated to you, the Wi-Fi will go down. It'll always be the really basic thing. And I once went to a university I think it was in the Netherlands, and they developed this care robot, which could help work in hospitals or care homes to carry stuff around and, to transport things around the building. And it was great. It was a humanoid robot that did the job really nicely. I saw it in the morning working very well. All of the press assembled in the afternoon when it was time to film it. And of course, then there's too many people there and the Wi-Fi connection went down. And you just see this sometimes where there's been something so clever developed and then it's always something like that happens. Otherwise, you just need to turn it off and on again sometimes.
What about unusual gadgets? Which ones stick out?
Unusual gadgets. Well, something I did a couple of weeks ago, which is very of the moment, was test some smart face masks.
Face masks?
So if everyone's getting a bit fed up of the mask they're wearing and would like to add a little bit of excitement to it to make wearing one feel a bit less of a chore, I tested one that had a microphone and earphones in it. So you'd be able to have a conversation without sounding muffled as the microphone is built in just under your mouth. And it's a washable mask with an N95 filter in it. That was quite nice. I have to say it wasn't the best fitting mask I've ever tried. So although the concept was brilliant, I wasn't 100% convinced on the fit. There was another that tracks your breathing rate as well as the air quality. So although it is mainly about pollution type air quality, it will also be able to tell you when a filter is expired and needs replacing. So at the moment, people aren't really throwing away disposable masks or replacing filters probably, unless you're a healthcare professional, as often as you should. And so getting that reminder could actually make quite a difference. And I also tested one that actually had UVC lights inside it, a massive thing that sits on your face. I looked like the supervillain Bane. It was quite scary. And it made a bit of a noise as the filter went on, but that was to kill off any particles of virus, apparently, that could sit there. But they're still waiting for various approvals.
I'm going to read you a recent tweet. You said on BBC Click this week how gaming has been shown to improve mental health, a concept rollable phone, and an app to invite an AR dinosaur into your living room. Tell us more about that particular show, because, I mean, that just gives us a perfect example, doesn't it, of, I suppose, that how many diverse things you do and how every week is so different.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it reinforces the idea of how technology isn't just about a few gadgets, because there's so many dimensions to it. And yes, I enjoyed testing the Augmented Reality app. My daughter loved it. We had a few dinosaurs wandering around the house, you know, the usual. But one of my colleagues, Mark, did the piece on gaming and mental health. And that was a really interesting dimension. And I think not something that people would automatically be thinking was beneficial, because we hear so much about too much screen time, too much gaming, all the reasons that gaming's meant to be bad for us, that actually to put a different perspective on it was really useful.
So how do you find new things to look at, Lara? Are you inundated with people sending you ideas that they'd like you to look at, or is it all about you going out and creating opportunities yourselves?
It's a mixture of both. I am inundated with ideas. Lots of things sent to me. Some are really great, some aren't. I also go to events like the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas every January, where you see all of the products being released that year. And it's a really good time to film a lot of stuff in a short space of time, but also make contacts for the weeks to come after that. Then sometimes it's just from what's going on in the news and then trying to see what there might be that relates to that. Obviously, there's been a lot of COVID-related stuff that we've covered in the last year. But sometimes it'll just be an idea. Like one thing that I did, and this was quite a long time ago now, but it's been one of the stories that I enjoyed the most, and I think had a particular value in it. I wore 4 activity trackers, 24 hours a day for 7 days, and compared the results at the end. And the results were completely different. One of them thought that I'd done thousands more steps than one of the others. One of them thought that I'd burnt, I think it was about 3,000 calories more than another, but it wasn't the one that thought I'd done the most steps. And 3,000 calories for someone of my size is a day and a half's food intake. What was really interesting here was I went back to the company to talk to them about these results. I spoke to 2 of the companies. These were leading manufacturers at the time. And 2 of them said to me the exact same thing, that yes, they were consistently inaccurate, so they won't be that precise, but at least you could compare yourself with you last week. And also, it'll help you be the best version of you that you can be. Now, of course, this sounds like the most brilliant PR spin you could ever hear. And admittedly, it was. But on the other hand, when I was walking around with these 4 activity trackers on, any person who already had one and saw me wearing one said, it's changed my life. I've been wearing one. I've lost a stone, or I now walk to and from the station 4 times a day. Whatever they were doing, they were then really endorsing the fact that it had changed their life having it. They didn't really care if it wasn't that accurate. Whereas anyone who hadn't worn one said, well, they're not accurate. I don't want one then. And I just thought it was a really interesting human reaction to it, actually.
It's funny that you mentioned wearing all those things, because I remember particularly in the early days of Click, coming round and having a coffee with you, and you were always wired up to something. I mean, what I loved, Lara, is right from day one, you took the whole testing side of it to the extreme, and you have to be rigorous, don't you, when you're trying out things like that and doing tests like that.
Did I ever test anything on you? Did I ever rope you into doing anything? I can't remember.
No, you've never. I mean, 10 years have gone by. There's still time, but no. But I do remember you with fitness gadgets on and all sorts of bits and pieces. You were always wired up to something. But I do remember from day one, notes and just being absolutely rigorous. And that is important in your role, isn't it? To really test things to the full.
It is. Of course, the detail is so important, and we've got to get it right.
We have. And how have you seen technology change over the last decade? Has it been fast, and is it going to get much, much faster?
What is so funny is, you know what it's like when you watch yourself on TV from a long time ago? How do you feel when you see a clip of yourself from 15 years ago?
Oh, you just feel like it was another time and that you were sort of so green and naive and young.
I think add to that, and how our hair may have changed or whatever, the fact that you're getting excited about some new technology, which is now so normal and every day, and it feels absurd to watch it back. But things move so fast that I can watch back something I did on It must have been about 14 years ago that I covered netbooks as though they were the next big thing, smaller and lighter laptops that really lacked power. So they were very slow, but they were fine for very, very basic purposes. They really never took off. It was a very short-lived exercise, but the great excitement at the time of how light and small it could be. Whereas now, obviously, you get a laptop like that anyway with the power of an actual laptop.
Does your mind boggle where you think we're going in the next few years? I mean, in the next few years, there's talk of flying cars, things like that. We are moving with AI. We're moving incredibly fast now, aren't we?
We are. And so much is possible and so much is expected. I sometimes interview futurologists. And they're always very interesting to talk to. Can you believe it's an actual job?
A futurologist? Gosh, I bet that's not on the careers curriculum.
No. And
what is a futurologist?
Well, a futurologist is somebody whose job it is to predict the future, but in a scientific and technological way, not just by looking at a crystal ball. And I love the things they say are going to happen. I'd interviewed one about 10 years ago, and he was saying then, we're going to have smart jewellery. You'll be able to talk to people through your jewellery, answer your phone through your jewellery. And well, that's happened. We've got smartwatches. I've tested some smart earrings and a smart ring. That's all taken place. But what one said to me recently, probably about 18 months ago, was how eventually none of us will care about decorating our homes or what TV we were to buy, because instead of even having a TV, we would wear contact lenses that played on them everything that we needed to see.
Oh my goodness.
So you would live your life in augmented reality through these contact lenses. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's terrifying in a way, but I can sort of see us going down that route. I remember, Lara, my grandfather, who went over the top at the Battle of the Somme. When he died, he was the last surviving member of the Grimsby Chums, and he was 100. And of course, in his lifetime, born in 1896, died in 1996, who would have thought at the beginning of his life that lumps of metal would fly? And when we started at Sky News, at the beginning of Sky News, he said to me, just always believe that anything's possible. He said, the things that have already happened in my lifetime, you never thought would have happened. So he said, the things you're going to see in your lifetime, always believe things will be possible. And that's true, isn't it? When we think of our children, Lara, and we think what their day-to-day commute might be like, just for example, it's going to be very different to ours, isn't it?
Absolutely. The first time that my daughter was old enough to consciously be on a phone call, she couldn't understand where the video was, because when she was younger, I'd done video calls so that my mum could see her, so family could see her. And it surprised her that you could have a call without video.
That's amazing. Well, head of IT in our household is the 11-year-old. Because, of course, I remember learning how to write an email, and I was probably, not wanting to date myself too badly, but I was probably late 20s or early 30s. And, of course, they've grown up around it. And does your daughter take interest in any of the technology? Are there any fun bits that she can test out or help you with?
She sometimes does help me test things. I like it when I've got an app that kids can test, so she can help me with it and I can get an opinion on it. But then I don't put her on TV. So a colleague will always film with one of their kids.
No, I don't think that's a good thing. But it's fun that she likes to help you behind the scenes a little bit. Let's dip into the old days a bit. I mean, when we first met and just clicked, no pun intended there, immediately, you were presenting the weather at Channel 5 News. How did you get into the weather presenting in the first place?
It was all rather by chance. I say by chance. Working in TV wasn't by chance. I had been on an absolute mission for that to happen. But my dream was always to be a showbiz reporter. In the early days, that was my aim. And I ended up getting a job on Liquid News. And I must have been, I'm just trying to think, I must have been 23. And I was already doing what I considered to be my dream job. And then this agent that I had at the time sent me for an audition for this Channel 5 weather job. Now, I didn't really want the job. I just thought I'd better go for the audition to be polite. So I went, and of course, when you don't care about getting something, you get it. And I ended up in this real dilemma. Did I want to leave Liquid News, or did I want to stay? And there were various factors in the equation. And I think at Liquid News, I was one of many people. The opportunity at Channel 5 was far greater because it was going to extend beyond the weather. And within about 2 or 3 years, I was doing their showbiz as well as the weather. So I made the decision to go to Channel 5, and it was absolutely the right decision. It was the most fantastic 6 years. It was great. It was a great place to be, and a great place to be at that age. It was beyond my wildest dreams, getting to do all the magazine shoots, all the shows I'd appear on. There was so much fun, and it was a very different type of job to what I've got now. Now I spend a lot of time at a desk arranging stuff and writing stuff as well as filming. That was very much about being out there and being out and about and the glamour of it all. But it was a fantastic way to spend my 20s.
And you became a personality very quickly. I mean, you were very well known across Britain, and they were really glamorous times. You were always in magazines and newspapers and things. But did you enjoy the weather side of it as well, and the learning curve that you went on that to be able to bring us the weather?
Well, the thing that I liked about doing it on Channel 5 was that it was really just telling people what the weather was going to be like tomorrow. Was it going to rain or not? Did they need an umbrella or not? We had a meteorologist who did the proper forecasting, and I was just relaying the information. So it wasn't like I had some expert knowledge of weather. I'd done a couple of minor weather courses, but it was very much a chatty weather style. And it was, I think that's what made it a bit different, actually, that it wasn't trying to be anything else. That's actually what it was. And for 6 years it worked that way.
I always think weather presenters are sort of held accountable. You know, if they say it's going to be a certain kind of weather and then it's not. Did you get people coming up to you in the street saying, you know, I didn't take my umbrella because you said not to, and then it rained? And
yes, it's funny actually, because it's hard to think back, but that did used to happen a lot. Definitely people in the street, people in supermarkets. I would get a lot of that, but I'm just very grateful that social media didn't exist at the time, because I think doing that job would have attracted too much attention of people complaining about the weather and stuff. I don't know what it's like for weather presenters now who are online and do have that to deal with, but I'm quite pleased I didn't at the time.
And what about the showbiz side? Because as you say, it did lead to you doing entertainment interviews and red carpets and interviews with lots of stars. That must have been a pretty heady time.
Oh, it was great. It was really exciting. And I could never quite believe my luck that it was happening, that I'd pop out of the office to interview all these Hollywood stars. I remember the first time our editor called me at a weekend and said, "What are you doing tomorrow? Do you want to go and interview Tom Cruise?" And this was the first time he'd given me any showbiz to do. And it's not a phone call you expect to get. And that was just the start of it. And that shoot actually was on a red carpet. And I'd waited out there for 5 hours. It was the time when Tom Cruise used to keep everyone waiting for a long time because he would be talking to people's mums or whatever on their phones. And then I remember he came over, and all the time through the interview, he was rubbing my hands to keep them warm. And then after that followed interviews with so many Hollywood stars, so many stars from the music industry. I loved it when we had interviews where we would have an hour to sit down with someone and you have proper time to chat rather than the 5-minute press junket kind of thing where it feels very controlled and in and out. But it was quite an experience, and one that I'm very, very grateful that I had.
When you look back on those, who else were your favourite ones? Who were the nicest celebrities, or the ones that you felt were...
I always loved Will Smith, but for a very funny reason. When you go in to do those junkets, as you'll know, you've done absolutely loads of them. You walk into the room, you sit down, you chat to them. There's this procedure that is the same every single time. Will Smith got up, walked over to shake my hand and say hello as I came through the door. And because nobody else had ever done that to me, it felt really meaningful and really polite. So I went away thinking, well, that was very polite of him.
And often people around them are a bit stressful, aren't they? But usually the celebrities are very, very sort of giving, even in those short, as we call them, those sort of junket interviews where, you know, it's one journalist in and one journalist out. I remember my first one was Charlton Heston, and I was so naive, Lara. I'd gone in and I'd been told that he would only talk about this small role he'd played in his son's new film. So I hadn't prepared properly. So I walked in and tried to string it all out. And I asked the first question about his son's film. And he was like, "Oh, well, yeah, it was great. It was good helping him out. But anyway, sort of on to other stuff." And I hadn't done my due diligence. That was the last time I ever walked into an interview and believed what they said before I went in. There was some, yeah.
Well, you just never know what you're going to expect. You never know what you're going to get when you go in.
My other favourite was I went to Venice for 10 minutes with George Clooney. I remember arriving at Venice airport, jumping in a little speedboat and going to the hotel. And just like you said with Will Smith, he came to the room and opened the door and he's like, "Hi, Helen, nice to meet you. How are you?" My knees just pretty much gave way at that point, and I don't really remember much about the rest of the 10-minute interview.
I'm not surprised.
He was absolutely charming. No, they were fun days, and premieres were fun, weren't they? You did a lot of premieres.
Yeah, they were. I always preferred the indoor interviews where I felt you could chat to people better, and live premieres were very noisy. I remember talking to Johnny Depp and the crowd was so loud I could not hear what the director was saying. I could not hear anything, and I was just hoping for the best. I talked for what seemed like the right amount of time and hoped it was at the right time. Actually, it did turn out to be fine, but at the time you don't know, and you feel that inner panic that you've gone on air and you just don't know what's going on.
If you haven't been in it, I think there's nothing quite like live, is there? There's nothing like live television. Are there any times where, it went wrong or it was a bit hairy because of the fact it just happens?
I think my Johnny Depp moment was definitely the most memorable. Other times, there's nothing specific I can think of. And now I've said that, something really bad's probably going to happen in the next week.
Oh, no, I don't want to jinx it at all. Now, in those early days at Channel 5, you started dating a lovely chap called Martin, and the public and our listeners will know that you're married to money-saving expert Martin Lewis. What is it like for you both having a pretty high profile and being so recognisable? Because I also know that you're both very private people.
I don't know, really. What is it like?
I just wondered, how do you manage your sort of TV personas with that, I don't know, with that sort of private and family time and making sure that you get time to yourselves?
We're actually very lucky because we have a lot of time together. I've got so many friends who travel for work or their partners travel for work a lot. And I do travel in normal times a fair bit for work. But generally, we actually have quite a lot of time together at home, which is lovely.
And that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does Martin make you live by his money-saving ways, or are you worse than him?
He loves telling people that I'm tighter than he is. But having the title Mrs MSE, I do sort of have to live up to it in some way.
He calls you affectionately Mrs MSE, doesn't he? Do you like that name? Are you quite fond of it?
I'm very happy with that name. I've had that name a long time. I was the money-saving girlfriend, then I was the MSF, the money-saving fiancé. Then I must have become Mrs MSE after that.
Oh, and I never forget.
Not a nickname I predicted.
No, and I missed your wedding because I was giving birth to Jack. So that was a bit of a shame not to be there. But I did have
I accept you had a good excuse, but I was gutted you weren't there. I remember talking to you, sitting, it must have been the day before or the day after. I remember sitting down talking to you about Jack. And so Jack must have been born a few days before. Yeah, we were talking about Jack and I was talking about how much I've missed you being there. I can remember that conversation so vividly now.
Me too. And just like, with you in your sort of weather days, if you're out and about, does Martin get stopped with people talking about their sort of financial questions and problems? Because I would imagine being the money-saving expert's a bit like being a GP. Whenever I run into Dr. Hillary from GMTV, I'm quick to tell him that, Jack's got a rash somewhere, or can he sort my mum's heartburn out or whatever. Is it similar with Martin in terms of people want to grill him and ask his opinion?
Yeah, I guess it is. And I've been guilty of doing that to doctors. I wouldn't want to be a doctor for that reason.
Oh, God, I certainly wouldn't. On your social media profile, you describe yourself as a gym junkie. How hard do you train?
Okay, I normally would run 5K about 5 times a week. One of those I'd do as a 10K if I had time. And then I'll do weight sessions about 3 times a week and a Pilates class as well if I can. It's all rather time dependent. So the runs are a lot easier because when we're not in lockdown, I do that run going to a place after school drop off or running home from work. So the run can actually become one of the journeys of the day, which makes it quite easy to fit in because my life is like a military operation. I'm so busy. I was doing something until literally 2 minutes before we started this conversation. I was frantically uploading some voiceover thinking it's only 20 seconds long and I've got 2 minutes. I've got time to record it and upload it. Yes, I can do it.
Oh, I think your life sounds like mine on that, jiggling balls all in the air. But I remember once asking you, I was like, oh, Lara, how do you keep such an amazing figure? And I was a bit dismayed when I got your answer because I thought you were going to say something like, 3 times a week in the gym. And when you detailed what you put in, I thought there's no wonder she's got an amazing figure because you work much harder at it than I do.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you for the compliment. I've always been particularly unsporty. At school, I was the person nobody wanted on their team. When people choose one person at a time for their team that they want, the 2 team captains, I was always the one left over. And when anyone got me, they'd go, oh. And I felt for them because I was terrible to have on their team because I have no coordination and I'm really slow and I'd be puffing and panting in this ridiculous way. But as somebody who was so unfit, with no coordination, so unsporty, I was so embarrassed to run in front of people. As a young child, I was quite chubby and my legs had rubbed together. And I was just really not built for speed. That I think as an adult, discovering how you can feel from fitness was such a revelation. And I was probably about 24 when I first started running. And I remember walking out of Tottenham Court Road tube station one day and just suddenly feeling like my lungs felt freer. It was the first time I felt this massive change in my body. And that really spurred me on. And I just became addicted to it from then on. And I really felt like I'd missed out on it up until that point in my life, just because structured sport that I had no coordination to be good at wasn't for me. But actually, fitness, you can do your own way at your own speed. And if you're not very good, you don't know. You just feel good that you've done the exercise. You're not comparing yourself to someone else.
I've always been tempted to try that couch to 5K. I like to do fitness and I've really been into it for the last year as well through lockdown. I can't run. And when I say I can't run, friends have tried to teach me, but sometimes I think everybody can learn. And I do remember you being at the beginning of that running journey and saying, I can't go very far, but I've started. And now you're a really good runner, aren't you? I mean, you've worked at it over the years.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't run for more than 2 minutes at the beginning. I had to gradually build up. And I remember when I was getting to the point where I could, with a mix of running and walking, manage 5K on a treadmill. So I think anyone who knows me now sees me as this crazy fitness fanatic. But actually, where I come from is such a bad place on fitness and sport that I do feel like if I can do it, most people could probably do it, but not everyone. Running isn't for everybody. And I found trainers made a difference. They made a real difference to me not getting injuries. Stretching is so important. And along the way, you just sort of learn what works for you and what doesn't. But I remember you were into that exercise thing that was it a 15-minute session that was meant to be the same as an hour or something? I can't remember what it was you used to do.
Yeah, short and sharp sort of HIIT training, which I did for a long time. But my sort of passion, as well as strength and conditioning training now, which I'm doing, and some HIIT, because I'm doing training, which I haven't had time to tell you about, but I will when we talk personally. I'm doing training for a filming project. Ooh. So for the last few months,
I look forward to hearing that.
Been doing an hour 5 or 6 times a week, which has been amazing. But also I love spinning and I've missed that in lockdown. So I suppose spinning is my running and I've persevered with that. It's low
totally
impact.
The equivalent.
But I find it really, really good for mental health. Not that I've been lucky not to suffer any sort of mental health issues as such, but with spinning, I can't wait to get in there. I can't wait to do the class and I feel amazing afterwards. And I think fitness really is part of my daily regime now, whether that be a walk or some strength training. And I think it does make a difference.
And that's it. It's becoming part of your routine. I think it is once you fitted it into your life, and especially when you fitted it into a very busy life where the time is so valuable, if you scheduled it in, you then can't miss it because you've given up that hour to do the exercise. So you've then got to do the exercise in that hour. There's no choice anymore.
Given the fact, Lara, that you've tested, pretty much every fitness gadget out there, what do you rely on? What's your key thing when you're out running or you're doing your training? Is there a gadget that you particularly like to use?
Well, actually, my husband doesn't understand this at all, but I'm not particularly bothered about my times. I'm not trying to beat myself. I'm just trying to keep running. So I don't actually track my running as well as you would expect me to. Something I tested recently was a bike called Carol, which is an AI-powered exercise bike. The way it works is that 2 20-second bursts of cycling as hard as you can within a 2-minute window of gentle cycling is meant to be as good for you as a 45-minute run. So I put this to the test for a few weeks, and as someone who would regularly do a 45-minute run, I just didn't feel like I'd done a workout after it. But I think there is obviously some science that backs it up. Not everyone agrees with that science, but it is based on a real thing. But I just wasn't so into that. But what I did find on the same bike was the HIIT training you could do in 20-minute bursts. You could choose how long you wanted to do it for. Oh, I've never worked out so hard. You did 60 sets of 8-second intervals going as hard as you could, and I've never worked out like it.
Oh, I see. That's interesting because as part of this project I'm doing, I tried to rent a bike for home and I couldn't get one for love nor money. And my trainer had the idea that I was going to do 30 seconds as fast as I could, 2-minute break. 30 seconds on again. And so I'm not quite sure what category that falls into.
Well, that's the same. It's just the same premise.
Yeah. So I think there's probably a lot to be said for that kind of thing. But because of lockdown, of course, it was, it was like toilet rolls. They were impossible to get. So I was quite relieved in the end. I didn't end up with my at-home bike. So I really felt I was doing quite a lot.
Totally. It was the funniest things that were sold out everywhere, like outdoor heaters.
Yeah, very strange things. Just going back a bit to childhood and stuff, Lara. I mean, sadly, I never got to meet your dad, but I'd love to have done because he ran a sweet shop, didn't he? Was it on the end of Bognor Regis Pier? And didn't you work there?
That's right. He was a confectionery manufacturer, and As a kid, you would think this was an absolute dream, but I never liked sweets. I loved working in his shop. From when I was 14, I started work there, and I've worked there in the school holidays, and that was great fun. I love working in the shop. I love totting up how much everyone was spending, putting their sweets in a bag. It was mainly seaside rock and sugar novelties, and I just don't eat those sort of things.
Hey, you were a bit of a whiz with the candy floss, weren't you?
Oh, yes, I like making candy floss and also Mr. Whippies. I remember the motion now of getting the pointy bit on the top of the Mr. Whippy, moving it around, making it swirl, and then the pointy bit, and then putting the flake in. So satisfying.
Oh, that's fantastic. And because I haven't seen you for a long time, are you still as into your Scrabble as you were?
Yes, we haven't had as much time to play recently, actually. But Scrabble and crosswords. We have matching crossword books and compete against each other.
I bet you two are quite competitive, are you?
I'm not competitive about most things in life. But for some reason, when it comes to Scrabble or crosswords, particularly Scrabble, I suddenly feel this competitive thing oozing out of me. It may just be because my husband's so competitive, it gets me into it. But I really, really care about the game. And I guess that's the only reason that I can actually play it. Because if I didn't care, I wouldn't be enjoying it as much.
Oh, I love Scrabble, but I don't think I'd want to play with Martin because I bet he knows all those 2-letter and 3-letter and unusual words that we've probably never heard of, does he?
We were so good at the 2 letters. We'd learnt them all. We got a bit rusty. We need to get back to playing more, I think.
So what's coming up for you on Click, and what sort of, what does 2021 hold?
Well, there's so many things that it hopefully holds. We just got to wait and see if they happen. We're due to do a massive Click Live stage show at the Dubai Expo 2020, which, if it goes ahead, will be in October. That was due to happen last year. It's maintained its name of 2020, even though it'll hopefully be 2021. So if that happens, that's the next big thing that I'm looking forward to. But I think right now, just being able to go out and about, go to interesting places, film with exciting people, it'll just be so nice to get back to it. We're managing to do bits, but obviously we all can't wait for normality.
So you've done well, I think, to be doing what you've done from home, and I can't believe that you haven't had your on-air sign lit up, and we've been really lucky. No one's disturbed us at all.
I did actually tell my daughter before, and she is normally quite good, so the on-air sign is just in case she forgets and excitedly runs in. But yeah, I've done okay.
I think you've done really well. It's been really lovely chatting to you for the podcast. I'm so looking forward to that time when we can catch up in person. And thank you, Lara.
Absolutely,
so
me too. I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. So lovely and fascinating. I've never interviewed you before, so it's been quite different for us, hasn't it?
It has been. It's been quite strange, really. I hope I said something interesting.
But you've been listening to BBC Click presenter and tech journalist Lara Lewington. Don't forget, you can download our podcast series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, or simply ask Alexa. Join me next week for another great guest. Bye for now.